So take it away, Kim.
Yeah, well, I'll talk a little bit and read some poems, but any question or a rebuttal, physically raise your hand and we'll pause. I wanted to start with a little story. So in 2018, I was appointed the Poet Laureate of Oregon. And this meant that I traveled all over to many communities, to prisons, homeless shelters, veterans groups, immigrants, the legislature, just witnessing with poetry. And my finest hour in this journey was I was in a little town out in Eastern Oregon, and the basketball team was playing. So I went to the game, and word spread through the crowd that there was the Poet Laureate was in the house tonight. And so I was asked to read a poem at halftime.
All right.
I realized it's not ever going to get better than this.
No.
So I did this poem, and then a lot of us went to the saloon to have dinner together. And there was a ranch wife there who is like a lot of people here. She was very active. She got on boards. She was kind of a lover of the earth. She got on the wildlife board and so on. And she started saying that she'd go to meetings, and everybody was so angry. There was a lot of shouting and there wasn't a lot of listening. And she said, "I'm so worn down, I'm about to give up." And this just broke my heart. I thought, if this smart, engaged, well-informed person gives up, then what's going to happen? So I made her a book. It's called We Begin a Better Nation. And I sent her 20 copies. And I'm just going to read a few poems from this book. They're poems to keep on, poems to help you keep on. So this first one is called Meeting Halfway. And I imagine it being read at one of those polarized meetings. Meeting halfway. Behold this empty space between your certainty and mine. This arena of sunlight, free of claim and counterclaim. This bright meadow where no one has shouted, bullied, or begged. Where butterflies are sovereign. Where bird song is our legislation. Where you and I could walk out into the open, look around, and speak. First of the children, then of our dreams, and only then of the work we will do together. Well, I thought of this as a kind of little spell to kind of clear the air. So often at meetings, people come with their position. And, if only everyone else didn't understand how right I am. And so, just try to imagine casting a spell with a few right words to open the meeting up. And
I totally get that, Kim. I'm
Yeah.
thinking of all kinds of venues where that is important.
Oh, yes. Cast a spell with your first words.
Yeah, well, when I talked to this woman, I said, "Yeah, we have to search for common ground," and she said, "No, new ground. We need to search for new ground because otherwise, we're trying to convince each other rather than learn from each other."
Yeah, that's
Wow.
And
Wow.
very wise person.
Yes.
I feel like a lot of my work in writing and teaching is to defeat reticence. So often you have a feeling, you have an idea, but you hesitate, because I couldn't say it right, or they wouldn't understand, or they wouldn't let me finish, all those hesitations. And for me, the practice of writing is a way to subdue my reticence, because while I'm writing, no one can say you're wrong.
Mhm.
there's a veterans group working with a wonderful writer named Maxine Hong Kingston. She wrote a book called Women's Warrior back in the 80s. And someone asked she would have the veterans write silently and then share what they'd written, their painful experience, their fears, their regrets, write and then share. And someone said, well, why can't you just talk? Why do you have to write? And one of the veterans said what I just said: while I'm writing, no one can say it didn't happen that way. I can finish my memory and then I can share it, then we'll talk. So this idea of writing being, I think of it as a place to settle my accounts. If there's something I am afraid of, I write about it. If there's something I regret, I can write about it. If there's something I'm going to face today, I can write about it. That poem is called Meeting Halfway. And I can send the poems I share to Judy, and she can send them on for anyone.
I will. I will definitely do that.
So this idea of settling your accounts, my wife, I have a very wise wife, Perrin, and she said one day, every day you become aware of something that's been ruined, destroyed, made extinct. Someone has told lies. Someone has torn something down. Something has, disgraced a beauty. And she said, what if every day you created something to talk back to all that darkness? It wouldn't have to be a big thing to be an important thing. And so that's the way I approach my morning ritual of writing, to talk back to that darkness by creating something, just a little poem, or as one of my students said, half a poem. I love that idea. I was giving an assignment. Let's each write a poem. And he said, could we just write half a poem? Yeah, good idea. So, just a few words. I've told my wife, on my tombstone, you may inscribe, he was easily pleased by a few words. Just a few words. And let me ask you, Joan, can I screen share? Is there a way I can do that? I want to show you by way of example, the poem I wrote this morning. It's kind of a funny thing. Our son last night got talking about hoarders, people who just keep stuff. And he had a story about these two brothers in Brooklyn. They shared an apartment and they had so much stuff in there, they just had tunnels. They didn't have walkways, they had tunnels. They had 12 pianos, but they were all buried with stuff. Wow. So this idea of hoarders, and into my mind, as he was talking, I thought, I wonder if we've always been that way. I wonder if back in caveman times, there were hoarders, who just fill up the cave. So one thing, I carry around a little notebook in my pocket, and you probably can't see this, but I just wrote, caveman hoarders. So the little notebook is so, I'm a writer because I forget. So I just wrote that down. And then this morning, you won't be able to see this, but every day I write the date on a piece of paper, and then I just kind of write, Dear Diary, this is what we did yesterday, sort of very important, because I'm writing before I have to write well. I'm just jotting, I'm just scribbling, doesn't matter. And then I often write kind of an idea, a thought. Like today, my thought was, there is truth and there is secret truth. There is secret truth and secret truth you don't know. There is secret truth you can seek and secrets that seek you. So I'm just sort of thinking, it's not a poem, it's just a thought. And then I started writing about the caveman hoarders. So this is my first version, and then I'll read for you the if this will work.
It should work fine.
Okay, can you see? Let's see. Here we go. It's down here. Can you see this poem?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Hoarders in caves.
Yes.
I'm a writer just to have fun. So I started imagining the different kinds of hoarders. Shellman's stinking mounds of shucked river mussel, snail shell necklaces, clam shell he'd traded from the coast. He obsessed on a shape, catching rain for a child, or ochre for the painter of bowls. He'd stare at his cupped hand, dripping water, then pick up a shell to show everyone. When he died, we closed that cave. But his children took up clay to make us bowls. I started getting this idea. The eccentric person, sort of the artist, the crazy one, does something that doesn't work out, but it's the inspiration for what does work out. So next one, Stone Boy. His cave held heaps of pebbles from the river, broken rock that held dull light, splinters of brittle stone that cut his fingers as he played. He grew old doing that, his cave hardly leaving him space for sleep. We heaped stones over his body at the end. But then his children napped flint to tip our spears for the mastodon. And Feather Woman, her cave stunk of wings torn from swan or duck. What the hunters left behind, she'd bundle with a root and stash. You'd see her dip the tip of one wing into the blood of another wing's root bone and mark stones. Do that all day, as if her scrawl held secrets only she could understand. No one knew what could ever come of that.
Wow.
Get it? This is what comes of that.
Yes.
So, it's just the news is assaulting me. My poor country is faltering. There's a lot of hatred. There's a pandemic. But I can create something to sort of cheer me up a little bit. Anyway, there's that. I'm just going to keep going until someone stops me.
Okay, we're loving this.
Well, Judy, I think you were talking about this poem, Advice from a Raindrop. Was that-
Yes, I love that.
Well, I thought I'd read this poem, often in the morning. So my routine is I get up about 4, I take a walk, often in the rain, in the dark. And sometimes I hear an owl, the coyotes. Just sort of start thinking about things, and then I make my coffee, sit down, and start my page. And so when I look around for what should I write about, the rain. The rain is available as my muse.
Yes.
So one day I started thinking about, what does the rain have to teach me? What if I spoke in the voice of the rain and just gave some advice to the humans? And this is actually, it's a very old thing in English poetry. Some of the earliest poems from about 800 are riddles where a creature speaks in the first person. And then you're supposed to guess, who's the speaker. So for example, there's one that starts out, when I travel over the houses of the people, my wings are singing. The breath lifts me high over the homes of heroes. I'm traveling, a spirit, a ghost. Well, it's the whistling swan, whose wings make this singing sound. So, but the effect in a poem of a creature or the earth, something in the earth or the weather speaking to you. It's a very old thing. So this is called Advice from a Raindrop. You think you're too small to make a difference? Tell me about it. You think you're helpless at the mercy of forces beyond your control? I've been there. You think you're doomed to disappear, just one small voice among millions? That's no weakness. Trust me, that's your wild card, your trick, your implement. They won't see you coming until you're there in their faces, shining, festive, expendable, eternal. Sure, you're small, just one small part of a storm that changes everything. That's how you win, my friend. Again and again and again.
I love it.
So the humble raindrop.
Wow.
Well, I have another poem, and since the screen share is working, I'll show you a little film. One thing I find myself often writing about, sort of in the spirit of that last poem, is the seed, the power of a seed. It's so small. It's so easily overlooked. And yet it can make a sequoia. And so I did what writers sometimes do. I went to a website called rhymezone.com. And you can type in any word and it'll just give you a whole bunch of rhymes. So just for fun, I started this poem, again, in the voice of a creature, in the voice of a seed. It's called I Am the Seed. I'll just do the first stanza and then I'll show you the film. Every chance I get, any place I fit, in a cleft of grit, in ravine or pit, by ancient wit, my husk I split. I am the seed. So, I'm just having fun, just sort of letting it roll. Well, one time in class, we were going around introducing ourselves, and one student said, I said, well, tell us your name and where you are and what you do and, then what you hope for in this class. So Bethany said, well, I'm Bethany. I live out in Lafayette, and I play harp in hospice. I said, well, how does that work? Well, sometimes someone's no longer able to speak, but they can hear music. So I sit by their bed and I play the harp. Well, we all cried, what a beautiful career. And I said, well, Bethany, could you bring your harp to class and play for us? So she played, and that was our writing prompt that day. She just played and we wrote, amazing things. So then I said, well, Bethany, I'm going to give a poetry reading out in Mount Angel. Could you bring your harp and play while I read? Well, once she did that, I thought, I don't want to read without a harp anymore. That's just too wonderful. So I sent my little poem, then I Am the Seed, to Catlin Gable School. One of my friends teaches first grade. So she read the poem to the kids, and they all made drawings of seeds, the work of seeds, of little roots and plants and everything. So this film I'm going to show you brought all that together. So you'll hear me reading the poem. You'll see the students' artwork of the seed growing. And then you'll hear Bethany's harp. Let me just show, and then we'll have some questions. Okay. Let's see here. Where are you? There you are. Okay. All right. Can you hear that?
Yes.
Yes.
Every chance I get, any place I fit, in a cleft of grit, in ravine or pit, by ancient wit, my husk I split. I am the seed. I fell to the ground without a sound, by rainfall drowned, by sunlight found, by wonder crowned, through luck profound. I am the seed. After fiery thief, after bout of grief, though life is brief, I sprout relief with tiny leaf beyond belief. I am the seed. I am the seed, small as a bead. Tell me your need, your hunger I'll feed. Any trouble you're in, I will begin, for I am the seed. Up I rise to seek the prize from all that dies by bold surprise. Small and wise, before your eyes, I am the seed.
Beautiful.
Oh, just beautiful.
Absolutely beautiful.
Just beautiful.
Yeah.
Such
What I mean about
insight.
the harp.
Beautiful.
Peaceful.
Combination.
Mesmerizing.
It's marvelous. And your insight is just extraordinary.
Well, yeah, I realize, when you're a little kid, I think one of the things that happens is you're just closer to the ground. You see,
Yeah.
you see things, you see little things, and they're important. And maybe I never grew up because I'm still obsessed with, turning over stones to see what's under them. And I'll just tell you a little story. One time when I was at Haystack in Maine, we were sitting by the water and under a hazel tree. And, there were filbert hazel seeds on the ground, or the little acorns. So I picked one up, and it had been split open by a squirrel. And inside this tiny little hull, I saw there was a spider web, and there was a tiny little spider there. And at the very center of the web was just a dot of dew. And so I got out a magnifying glass and I looked at that little globe of dew, about the size of a pinhead. And inside there was a worm that was sort of dancing, going. And so I saw that just my breath had made the little drop of dew smaller. I was just drying it out. So I put it back into the moss. And then I picked up another one, and in that was a spider. And at the center of the web was a little drop of dew, and inside was a little worm. And I put it down, and I just thought, we are surrounded by miracles.
Yes.
Not because they're not there, but because we don't
Stop.
stop to look. So writing for me is one way to stop and look.
And get closer to the ground.
Yeah, get closer to the ground, or get closer to your enemy's opinion,
Yes.
closer to the story you don't understand yet.
And children aren't conditioned not to look.
No.
Yeah, that's right.
No.
Yeah, the world is calling to us all the time, but we just get so busy.
We don't look.
Yeah. So, my predecessor as poet laureate is a woman named Elizabeth Woody. She's now the head of the museum at Warm Springs, Navajo, Wasco, very wise person. And in her last poetry reading as poet laureate, she said, the more I do poetry, the less it's about what the poem is, and the more about who the poem serves. Who the poem serves, like my little book. So, this poem is for
Somebody.
a person who needs some consolation. And this whole idea of a poem for someone makes me want to read a poem. I think I have it here. Well, okay, this poem is for everyone. It's, one day I was just really cast down by the state of the world. I don't know if I'm alone in this occasional feeling.
You're not.
And so I went back through my pages and those thoughts, the boring prose, then the thought, then the poem. And so I just collected a lot of these thoughts. So every line in this poem was written on a different day, just trying to console myself. It's called Citizen of Dark Times. Agenda in a time of fear, be not afraid. When things go wrong, do right. Set out by the half light of the seeker. The well-lit problem begins to heal. Learn tropism toward the difficult. We have not arrived to explain, but to sing. Young idealism ripens into an ethical life. Prune back regret to let faith grow. When you hit rock bottom, dig farther down. Grief is the seed of singing, shame the seed of song. Keep seeing what you are not saying. Plunder your reticence. Songbird guards a twig, its only weapon, a song. So, that idea of, I think because my father was a pacifist, that you go into conflict with open hands, open heart, open ears, and your only defense is words, goodwill, a story, maybe. Now, before we get to this point, let me just tell you a story that I remember, that deflects the dualistic opposition. Well, any thoughts, questions?
Oh, so many thoughts, but how about from my friends, how many questions or comments, something that's resonated with you?
Oh, yes.
Something that bubbled to the top and you find yourself saying, oh, yes, yes, or yes, and I need to write that.
I just wrote down prune regret to let faith grow.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll send that one to you too, Judy, and maybe. Yeah, I was volunteering one time at a writer's center, and we were doing the cleaning up the yard and so on. And my job was to prune the grapevine. It was up on a trellis, and I didn't know how to prune a grapevine, but they said you do it. And so I was up on the ladder, and after the work session, I was supposed to give a workshop on writing and revising. And I hadn't really figured out what I was going to say. So I was up there with pruning shears, and I overheard these two women talking about their gardens. And one of them said, well, So you're a really good gardener. Every time I go by your place, it's just everything's thriving. How do you do that? Well, I just stick something in the ground and see what happens. And I thought, that's how I write.
Uh-huh.
I just put some words down and then see what happens. But how about revising? How do you do that? So I called down to these ladies. Hey, you guys know more than me. How should I be pruning these grapevines? Cut back to green. I thought, oh, that's how you revise. Yeah. You get your draft and then you cut back, you cut off the dead parts.
I love
Then I was
that.
all ready for the workshop.
Spend much time doing revisions?
Is it, excuse me? Well,
Do you spend much time doing revisions? Are you?
well, I spend a lot of time right away. Some people are very, they brag. Some of my writer friends brag about how long they've spent revising a poem. There's only one line left from the original draft by the time I was done. For me, I post a poem to Instagram every morning. So I write it and then I have to revise it right then. So, I write it by hand and then I type it into the computer. And I have a Word file just called versions, the title of the poem, versions. And then I just keep revising. I probably do 4 or 5 different versions. Like the poem this morning, it was about 12 lines long on the page, but then it ended up longer. So yeah.
So Kim?
Yes.
What was I remember your mom was a school teacher in Oswego.
That's right.
What did you learn from her, or what did you teach her?
Well, one thing, I learned a lot from her. She, she only had the use of her left hand.
Yeah.
From childhood, from birth, actually. And she's very graceful about it. But she, some of my friends, when I was in 4th grade and she was teaching 4th grade at Forest Hills Elementary, some of my friends were in her class and they never noticed because she had such a graceful way. So as a mother, she couldn't come and get you and say, listen to me. All she could do was say, let's go over here. Come here. Let's look at this, the sort of the offering, the gesture. And I think one of the main things I learned from her was that invitation, teaching by invitation, not by lecturing, not by assigning, but what would happen if we tried this? Or, what about the two of you getting together and, bring us back an idea about this? I went her last year of teaching. She was over at Lake Grove Elementary then. And I thought, I've never actually watched my mom teach. I better go watch. This is her last year. So I came into the building and I realized I didn't know which room it was, but I heard singing. So I went down the hall and yeah, that was my mom's room. They were all singing. And I watched her, as I was saying, sort of gesturing to the kids. Well, let's get in our reading groups now. You want to just circle around here? And I think so that being the listener, being the receiver, being the one who's hungry for learning rather than brimming with being learned. So Sandy, does that respond?
Yes, that's great. Yeah.
Funny thing though, I wrote a book about my dad called Early Morning. I wrote a book about my brother called 100 Tricks Every Boy Can Do. And after reading those, my mom said, don't write about me till I'm gone. And so the day she died, oh man, those poems came pouring out.
Yeah.
She was 97, and I just have to tell one story about my mom. So she'd had a fall. She was in pain. We were at the hospital. It was 2 a.m. And we couldn't get a doctor to bring pain medication for her. So I was running up and down the halls, and we finally got this young doctor, and he came in and he said to my mom, Mrs. Stafford, I'm going to have to put this oxygen mask on you. Is that okay? And my mom looked at him and said, well, it is almost Halloween. And he
gosh.
looked over at us very puzzled. And I said, that's a joke. It's okay. So
Presence of
bright
mind.
spirit, very bright spirit.
Oh,
You talk
Yeah,
about
Susan.
receiving and listening. And as you're speaking, I'm realizing that I have very good hearing, but sometimes I listen so much better when I'm reading the words.
Oh, yeah.
Have more time
Yeah.
to soak them in and use whatever past experiences, but it's a deeper processing than our conversations, which seem to go so quickly.
Yeah. Well, in education, till I retired in August, I was part of the School of Education at Lewis and Clark. And we talk about learning styles. Some people are visual learners. That's just the way we're made. Some are auditory. So our son he's dyslexic. So he's very auditory. I mean, he can hear a song and repeat the whole text, but reading is a challenge. So we need to find our way of learning, our way of writing, our way of speaking, and then use it. Don't be reticent.
that's so penetrating, that idea that he comes from writers.
Yeah.
But reading is a difficult chore for him. And so he's had to figure out something else for himself.
Yeah, and I would say one thing, Judy, about that. Often in class, let's write 3 or 4 things and then choose one to share with the group. And so often before someone shares, there's this effusive apology. Well, mine isn't very good because I'm not very good at this, and it's not. And what I've realized over time is people tend to apologize for their gifts. For the unusual way they do things. And I read an article in the New York Times Book Review yesterday about how writing classes are often taught, I'm going to teach you the craft of writing. This is how a story is structured. This is the plot line that you need to learn, and so on. And this person said, that is thinly disguised cultural disregard of different ways of telling a story. You're calling it craft, but it's actually reinforcing a very narrow kind of storytelling. And we should be open to many voices, a democracy of voices, wide, rich, wonderful range of ways to do things. And the great thing about poetry is there is no one way to do it.
Yes, Lord. The experience of each different raindrop.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Well, I've got a comment or a question. I live in Forest Hills, near where you used to live. I think as a child, I walked past there all the time up by the grade school. And in one of your books, and it might have been the book about your brother, you talked about sneaking out in the middle of the night, going over to the high school or the grade school and getting on the roof.
Oh, yeah. No, it was the Presbyterian Church, Vicki.
Okay. Can you tell a little bit more about that story?
Yeah.
Because I loved that.
Well, I was just so curious as a kid. And when I was, here's one thing that my mom and dad did that is very important. If any of you have grandkids, you should do this. They had a book where they'd write down things we said, before we went to school. Because you think as a parent, I will remember that forever. That was so cute when, Kimmy said that. Well, no, they wrote these things down and then they gave us a book when we went to school, finally kindergarten. Here's your first book. And it was called Lost Words. And one of the things I said when I was very young, I just announced, it was in the evening after dinner. And I said to my mom, I'm going out to get the nice feel of the night.
Oh,
Wow.
And so I've always had a fondness for the night, So the story you're referring to, I decided I wanted to play my clarinet for God in church. at night. It just seemed like the thing to do. Well, how would I do it? Well, I took my clarinet and put it in my backpack. I was probably a junior in high school, and I walked across the golf course in Oswego, and I got down to the train track, and I walked along the train track, and I came up a secret path, and then there was a wisteria vine on the side of the church, and I climbed up that, and I got on the roof, and I thought I'll just open the skylight, but I couldn't get in, so next Sunday at Sunday school, I unlatched one of the windows on the second floor, and then I got my clarinet and walked across the golf course, down the railroad track, up the secret path, climbed the wisteria vine, went over to the window, and it was locked. The next Sunday, I unlocked it again, and anyway, this went on, and eventually I went to unlock the window, and the janitor had left a note. I don't know who you are, but do not touch this latch. So I didn't get to play my clarinet for God.
So close.
So close.
That is marvelous.
Okay, well, I have to add a story to that. So I decided, well, I'll play my clarinet for the girl I wish was my girlfriend. And so I knew where her house was because we had dropped her off one time. So I took my clarinet. I got on the railroad track, and a train was coming along very slowly. So I got on I climbed onto one of the cars, and we were going along. And I learned something very important. If you're ever going to ride the rails, this is very important to know. If you're on the outside curve, say you're climbing up the ladder on the outside curve, the engineer can't see you, because the train's curving. If
Good
you're
to
on
know,
the
people.
inside curve, they can see you. They saw me. They stopped the train. I ran down into the bushes, and they came and threw some rocks down there, and went on. Anyway, I eventually got to this girl's house, got out my clarinet, and started playing the Adagio from Mozart's clarinet quartet. Very beautiful piece. And suddenly the lights came on in the house, and the screen door opened, and the little barking dog came out. Chased me away. Just when I was so close again.
Sure, again, so close.
And years later, I ran into her, and she said, "Was that you out there?" I said, "Yeah." Well, she said there was an eclipse of the moon, and so we all got up to watch it, and we heard this weird music, and my dad said, "Is that the radio?" Anyway, we married another, and she named her daughter Kim.
Oh,
Isn't that touching?
okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to read another poem here. We're about to wrap this up, I think, but let me read. This is a very short poem. It's called "For the Woman Picking Litter from the Beach."
Oh, that's great.
Her task is vast, in fact, impossible. So why is she humming as she snatches plastic bits from drift rack all along the high tide line? Glum lovers pass, their world of finite joy already waning, while her future is filled with a clear calling ahead and a clean set of tracks behind.
Neat.
Wow.
Good. Very good.
That for me, that's one thing writing helps me with, a sort of a clear sense of this is my calling, to put down what's in my heart, to put down what I remember, to put down my fears, to put down what I love. And then behind me, I've left word.
Beautiful.
Wonderful.
Absolutely brings
Beautiful.
so many tears to my eyes when I breathe in what you've reminded us today, because it's in us.
Absolutely.
And some of us are closer to the ground than others.
Yes.
And not getting taller.
No.
But really, we're talking about sparking joy and sparking possibility. I have personally a number of ideas that I would like to accomplish.
Yeah.
And not just for me, but the conversation Kim and I had before all of you got on about bridges to change and agencies who work with people who are coming out of incarceration and what they need and why they made a detour in life. And the Coffee Creek prison example of writing, I can see us doing that with groups of people and having them feel that self-empowerment. How about the rest of you? What are you thinking now?
Well, right now, Coffee Creek is a mess. I just read that due to the COVID, due to money. Yeah. So I wouldn't like to be involved right now.
Yeah.
No, and I'm not thinking that we should go into those places, but you personally, and Sandy, since you gave us this marvelous idea about contacting Kim, is there
Well,
something
there is a way to help Coffee Creek. There's a group I was telling Judy and Joan. It's called Open Hearts, Open Minds. And this is a group that does dialogue circles in prisons and sends books and really makes a crucial connection.
Yeah.
So that's one thing to support is Open Hearts, Open Minds.
Yeah, but maybe we could, because I've done that before, but now it just sounds like it's like the rest of our life. Maybe you could write a poem about that.
Well, I actually have a poem here. That was my last poem, but let me read this. One of my friends who goes into prisons, he was talking to his friend Rocky, and Rocky told him a story that was very touching to me. When Johnny told me, this inmate said, Johnny, you're in lockdown. And, here on the inside, we're used to that.
Mm-hmm.
But for you, it's going to be hard. Are you okay? Are you going to be okay? And, just this idea of an inmate feeling compassion for someone on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
So I imagined this inmate calling his mother to worry in that way. And I wrote this poem. I sent it to Johnny. He sent it to Rocky. Rocky wrote to Johnny. Johnny wrote to me. Someone understands who I am.
Wonderful.
So this is the poem's called Inmate Calls Home. Mom, I've been all night worried. This virus thing, they say it gets everywhere. So don't go out, okay? Get food, sit tight, read. Just read. You like that. Make calls. Not like visits. I know. You love those friends. Nights, I hear you tell them things in my mind. But Mom, I've been worried. Cabin fever. Yeah, here on the inside, we're used to that. Lots of practice. Time crawls like a broken dancer. You watch it. But Mom, what you gonna do with all that time? No visits, no go where you want, no bench in the park you like. Nights, Mom, no worry. No, you worry, okay? Me, I'm good. I'm so good.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So you can write. Oh, there's a gentleman who has a letter campaign for pen pals in prison. There are ways. There are always ways.
And Joan, maybe we can take that on as a Willow project.
I'll send you the link, Judy, and
That would be terrific.
That's a great
Mhm.
idea.
Wonderful.
I have a friend, older lady who went into a prison in Utah, and going in, she said, "What am I going to say?" She wanted to help, and she went in, and then she had an inspiration. Here were the whole room of these really rough, tattooed guys, and she said to them, "How many of you have a grandmother?" These tough guys that raise their hand. And how long has it been since you saw your grandmother? 15 years, 25 years. She said, "I'll be your grandmother.
Oh my
Come
goodness.
up to me. Come up to me."
Oh,
Man, it was a love fest.
Yeah.
You know, there are ways.
Mhm, mhm.
Well, you've been very patient with me. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Oh,
Judy.
Thank you.
thank you.
It's been
Thank
beautiful.
Wow.
I
Thank
so
you.
admire the work you're doing.
You did,
We do
you,
this every.
you just apologized for one of your greatest skills.
Okay, I have to say one thing to all of you. Many of my classes are all women.
Uh-huh.
And in fact, one of them made me an honorary woman. But I've asked myself, why is that? And the answer is women do the work of the world.
Yep.
That's my belief.
Well, how did you feel?
Oh, I'm so honored. Yeah. Well, you know, I grew up all through grade school hearing this sentence over and over. Kiyum, that's a girl's name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Kim,
What you do?
this is an extraordinary privilege,
Yeah.
marvelous experience. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So much.
Thank you, right
Inspirational.
here.
I'll send some things to Judy and see you
Great.
down the road.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So
Thank
much.
you.
Bye.
Yeah.
Wow.
Bye, Kim.